So hello everybody, this is Bhante Joe here, and just here at the Rouge Valley, which is actually a very lovely kind of park on the border between Pickering and Toronto, and is actually Canada's first national urban park. So there's kind of the Rouge River behind me, and it's got a very nice feel to it. So I thought that I could record a short video here, and maybe you could start with a little bit of meditation. So we can lean forward a bit and arch the spine and look about 3 feet in front and close our eyes. And can focus in on the breath. Can know when it's coming in and know when it's going out. If we breathe in a long breath, can just know I'm breathing in a long breath. And if we breathe in a short breath, can just know I'm breathing in a short breath. And can try to make awareness as continuous as possible, being aware all the way through the in-breath. As the in-breath turns to the out-breath, all the way through the out-breath, and then as the out-breath turns back to the in-breath again. And before we finish meditating, can spread thoughts of goodwill, wishing may all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make our minds infinite, can make them unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. Okay, and can open our eyes and do a short reflection on the Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. So hope that everybody's having a great day, wherever might be in the world. And so I was reading this kind of interesting verse today in the Dhammapada. It kind of paraphrases, it said, only for his destruction or ruin does renown come to a fool. It ravages his bright fortune and rips his head apart. And it said, basically said, gains, offerings, and fame go one way, and the path to gains, offerings, and fame goes one way, and the path to nibbana goes another. So knowing this, a wise person should put gains, offerings, and fame aside, and should cultivate seclusion instead. And so I was actually at this, I was at Bhante Srinapala's meditation class a few weeks ago, and he gave a talk about people spending time, that touched on people spending time in solitude in the forest. And since the kind of earliest days of Buddhism, the Buddha was actually a kind of forest-dwelling monk. He kind of was born in the forest. He attained nibbana, or enlightenment, in the forest. He set the wheel of Dhamma rolling in the forest, and he died in the forest. So his whole life was punctuated, or was kind of the thread of his life, a lot of it. When you see what he was doing, he spent a lot of time in the forest, especially meditating. And when a person wants to cultivate meditation, this kind of goes the opposite way of the ways of the world. It's kind of, the purpose of meditation is to try to find a happiness inside that doesn't depend on external things, but to basically find a permanent happiness. But the way to seek this is not kind of through external things, like kind of wealth or status or houses or cars. And this goes against the grain of the world, because the way the world runs is towards these things. The world kind of runs towards houses, runs towards status, runs towards cars, runs towards all these various things. And so when a person comes to meditate, what they end up doing is adopting a set of practices that go against the grain, kind of go against the grain of what they call gains, offerings, and fame. And this is why the Buddha says kind of the path to gains goes one, or my understanding, why he says the path to gains, offerings, and fame goes one way, the path to unbinding goes another. Kind of knowing this, the wise person should put aside gains, offerings, and fame, and should cultivate seclusion instead. And so this kind of seclusion that a person looks to cultivate basically means going where there's not too much activity, kind of not too many people around, not too much happening. And the purpose of this is so that a person can find a place where they're not kind of too outwardly distracted, where they can have their mind focus in and stay with their meditation object. Oftentimes when a person sits down to meditate, thoughts can race out to kind of gains, offerings, and fame, kind of praise and blame. Okay, what did this person say? What did he think of me? What did she think of me? Is my status going up? Is my status going down? Is my wealth going up? Is my wealth going down? And of course, all these things are, to a certain extent, things that people need to think about if they're living in the world. But the thing about trying to find a true happiness is that it doesn't kind of work out so well when one looks for a true happiness in these things. The thing about gains, offerings, and fame is that there's a lot of different ways that a person can acquire them. So quite often, in a lot of kind of religious teachings, there's this like metaphor where a person's very virtuous, they develop a lot of good qualities, and then they get these kind of temptations. Why don't you just have this one little extra thing, but at the cost of some morality or, some of your virtue. And this is a kind of interesting parable, because in Buddhism, the thing that allows a person to get gains, offerings, and fame, ironically enough, is the kind of like generosity, doing these good deeds. That's what inclines a person's mind towards them. That's what lets a person kind of have the qualities necessary to acquire these things. But the interesting thing about them is that in acquiring them, one kind of tends to launch out to these things and forget about the things that cause them. So in other words, a person develops kind of a taste for wealth. Say they had to work hard, go to school, do all these various things. These are the times when they're putting the causes into place for their wealth. But then if a person gains a lot of wealth, then sometimes these temptations to kind of abuse the wealth or to do poor quality things to get more can come up. And these temptations seem to come up more strongly and more frequently when one has wealth. So in other words, one starts to put the weight of one's identity, the weight of one's self-worth on gains, offerings, fame, praise, blame, all these various kind of external things that the world runs towards to. And when a person does this, it can develop slowly, bit by bit, so that they would basically do almost anything to keep it. There's this kind of sutta where the Buddha says, there's a time when I see a person and I know he wouldn't tell a deliberate lie even for the sake of, his mother or his father or for his life. But then at a later time, I see him telling a deliberate lie for the sake of gains, offerings, and fame. So in other words, these gains, offerings, and fame have this quality to them which can make a person launch out to them and love them, particularly because this is what the world loves, what the world praises. But when a person wants to seek a true happiness, they have to do what the Buddha says is put aside covetousness and distress with reference to the world. So in other words, thinking about all the ups and downs that a person has had in the world, all the gains that a person could have, all the praise that they've had, the blame that they've had, all these various things kind of serve as an obstacle to having the mind focus in on what we want to focus it on, and having it to focus in and settle in on our meditation object, to settle in on the breath, to searching out ways to find dispassion for these various things that are actually causing us to suffer. And so when a person wants to try to find a true happiness, they often do so by, the Buddha recommends, searching out places of solitude, seeking out places that are quiet, that don't have too many people in them. And there settling down to try to do some meditation, to try to put forth effort to train one's mind in wholesome qualities, to train it away from unwholesome qualities. So it's in this way that the path in that Dhammapada is the path to Nibbana leads another way, leads to cultivate solitude instead of gains, offerings, and fame. So to the extent that gains, offerings, and fame, praise or blame, whatever it is external, might arise in a person's life, to a certain extent everybody has to deal with those things. Okay, we all have to deal with them. But then when a person wants to try to find a true happiness, they learn to train their mind to just see those things as kind of basically tools, okay, I've come into gains, what use is this, or what effect does this have on, how can I use this to increase my wholesome qualities, decrease my unwholesome qualities? So in doing this, a person's focus shifts away from gains, offerings, fame, praise, and blame in and of themselves to learning to train their mind. Their mind slopes in a different direction than the way that the world slopes. Kind of get the backhoe out and dig the hill so it slopes in a different direction. And kind of this direction slopes towards solitude, slopes towards seclusion, slopes away from covetousness and distress for the world, as far as my understanding what the Buddha taught. Kind of very interesting that a lot of what they called the Kruba Ajahns in Thailand, these kind of famous teachers who reached the end of the path, when they were at the times when they were gaining the most in their practice, nobody knew who they were. They were just not famous at all. And kind of later they became very famous. But it was at the time when nobody knew them, when they were practicing on their own, that they were gaining the most in their meditation practice, that they were gaining their noble attainments. So people, people who desire true happiness can set up kind of a wish for this, instead of a wish for, may people praise me, may I be famous, may I be well liked, may I be well loved, can set up a wish, may my mind become rich in wholesome qualities, may I become somebody who has bountiful inner wealth. Everybody needs to deal with outer wealth again, to a certain extent, monks much less so. But when we set this idea up, may my mind have this inner wealth, then we set the conditions for the mind to slope and incline towards this solitude, to slope and incline towards places where it's peaceful, where it's quiet, where it's suitable for cultivating the mind, where it's suitable for training it to settle in on its meditation object, to find a type of peace that doesn't depend on the ways of the world. And this is one of the reasons why the Buddha says, kind of delightful places where run-of-the-mill people don't delight, that's where the arahants find delight. It's because they're not looking for external sensual pleasures. So because of this, they look for these places where it's good to cultivate the mind. And in doing so, in finding these places and using these places to practice well, they find peace inside of themselves. They find ease inside of themselves. So it doesn't depend on these gains, offerings, and fame. They set themselves on the path to Nibbana. So this is a kind of few thoughts based on that Dhammapada verse, and based a little bit on Bhante's talk the other day, and thinking about the Buddha's instructions to try to find time to meditate alone, to try to find kind of peace for ourselves, to try to find happiness for ourselves. So I think leave that for reflection, and hope that everybody has a great day, and wishing you all the best till next time.